But today, we're going to cover the issue from a different angle. We're going to pull the politics out of the issue and take a look at the success of legal immigration in our country. My guest today was a refugee himself from Vietnam. His is a story of hope, a story of the American dream, live and well. Dr. VINH, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Liz. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here today. Now, will you share with our viewers a little bit about your story?
Sure. So it was in 1979 when my family fled communist Vietnam. After the fall of Saigon in 1975, my family had lost everything. We lost our business. We were kicked out of our own house and forced to live in the rural Mekong Delta. And so after a few years, my parents realized that there was just no future for their 8 children. So they loaded us up in a boat and we went out to the South China Sea. And out there, we were drifting for days with no food, no water. And we were eventually picked up by an American ship from World Vision.
And now, how old were you when this happened?
I was only 3.5.
Do you have every memory of it?
I have some memories, but in my the book that I wrote, Where the Wind Leads, is actually a story based upon the memories of my entire family. And so a lot of the details came from my parents and older siblings.
Right. Now, that's a long time ago, but that's a very significant thing to happen. How do you feel when you're watching the current Syrian refugee crisis? Do you feel connected to them or drawn into the controversy that's been under discussion in the United States because they're facing similar circumstances to what you and your family faced so many years ago?
Absolutely. It's eerily similar because in 1979, I was 3.5 years old, and a couple of months ago, we saw the photo of a little three-year-old boy who drowned as a refugee. And so I know there are a lot of political issues that are going on, a lot of legal issues that must be resolved. But until then, there are 12 million people who are displaced from their home because of violence. And so when I look at what's going on, I would like us to look at it as more than just a political problem, but as a humanitarian crisis. And so that's what drives me to speak up on behalf of the refugees.
Right, and I'm glad you bring up that because I want to discuss from your perspective as someone who I'm sure feels the compassion even more than the average American, who we all feel compassion for these people displaced from their homes. But from your perspective as someone who's experienced this very same thing, what is the balance, in your opinion, of showing compassion to these refugees and allowing them safe passage and harbor here, but also balancing the safety aspect of ensuring that these people have been properly vetted and that the security concerns for those Americans who are already here is kept in consideration?
Sure. So you bring up great points. And I believe that the political environment today is different from how it was when my family came over as refugees. And I believe that in the long run, the violence must end in Syria. And it is my hope, and I believe that it's the hope of most of the refugees, that one day when the violence ends, they can go back and return to their homes, that kids can go back to school and people can go back and rebuild their lives. And I hope that this will happen one day. But until then, we have 12 million people wasting away in refugee camps, and I believe that we must do something about it.
Right, and I think you make a good point about the fact that the narrative is driven by politicians or driven by media who have political agendas. So who should be driving this narrative? Sometimes when these refugees arrive, even before they're here in our country, they don't really have a voice, a platform to state their arguments, and it gets relegated to politicians who don't always have a good idea of the human aspect, the humanitarian aspect. Who should be driving this narrative?
That's right. Well, I believe that when we think about this crisis, I believe that the refugees should play a role. They should be at the table. Because back in 1979, it wasn't a political solution that rescued my family from the South China Sea, but instead it was a group of courageous and generous American Christians from World Vision who sent a boat out and rescued my family. And it was because of their actions of individuals that I'm alive today. And so today, while we are figuring out the political details of what's going on there, I hope that Americans will feel empowered to do something about it. So that's why I support organizations like World Vision, who have boots on the ground in the refugee camps around Syria to directly help these people. So as an individual, I'm able to help by making financial contributions.
Right.